Cittanupassana, contemplation of mind. So we talk on mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feeling, and today we are going to talk on mindfulness of mind, or contemplation of mind. After contemplating of body, high, feeling vedana, the next is for the practitioners to contemplate the mind. Mind is another very important part. It is very interesting. Mind becomes mindful of the body. Mind becomes mindfulness of feeling. And mind becomes mindfulness of mind itself. That is a very tricky practice. Mindfulness of mind. This practice is known as Cittanupassana. Cittanupassana, the concentration of mind. Let us see how this is practiced. The mind plays central role in our life. Everything we experience is known through the mind. All thoughts, emotions, intentions, memories, perceptions, and decisions arise in dependence upon the mind. The happiness and suffering we experience are closely connected to the conditions of our mind. For this reason, the Buddha repeatedly emphasized the importance of understanding and training the mind. See, Citta Visuddhi, we talked about in purification, Citta Visuddhi, Cittanupassana. However, the mind is much more difficult to observe than the body, as I mentioned earlier. Body can be seen and felt directly. Feelings can be recognized when they arise. The mind, however, is very, very subtle, constantly changing, and difficult to grasp. ordinary people do not understand the true nature of the mind. They allow greed, hatred, fear, and delusion to govern their thoughts, speech, and action. As a result, suffering continues. You hear the word, the sentence in Anguttara Avasramidam Vikaritam, Tantako Agantuke, Upakilesi Upakrita. This mind is luminous, but through the advantage of defilements, it defiles. So without training, we cannot remove these defilements. Without training the mind, concentration cannot mature and wisdom cannot fully develop. So Asuta Kusatinotta Napajanati, Asma Asuta Sukutujanasa, Chitta Bhavana Namanati, Upanya Bhavana Namanati, that means untrained ordinary people who don't know Dhamma, who don't associate with the right people, Sapurisa, Atapurisa, Natapurisa, Yapurito, Sapurisa Dhamma Alinito, those who do not associate the right person and do not know their Dhamma, they don't know how to develop concentration or wisdom, mindfulness. Therefore, the purpose of this kind of Cittanupassana is not to analyze the mind philosophically or to create theories about it. Rather, it is to observe the mind directly as it functions in the present moment, any present moment. Practitioners learn to recognize the irregular states of mind that arise and pass away. They learn to see when the mind is affected by greed, hatred, or delusion, and when it's free from them. They learn to recognize concentration as an distraction, liberation and bondage, and many other mental states. As mindfulness becomes stronger, practitioner begins to see that all mental states are conditions, impermanent, and constantly changing. Not mental state remains permanently, no mental state. None can rightly be regarded as I, me, mine. Through this direct observation, attachment to the mind gradually weakens and wisdom grows. In this section, today we will follow the Buddha's instruction exactly as they are presented in the Satipatthana Sutta. We will examine the various states of mind, learn how to observe them with mindfulness, and understand how this practice leads to insight, purification, and liberation. Now, the Buddha's instruction on contemplation of mind is this. Having explained contemplation of the body, contemplation of feeling, as I mentioned preoccupying with the mind, following it, or attempt to correct it, control it, one simply knows it clearly as it is. How Buddha said that? How Buddha said, how because does a bhikkhu dwell contemplating mind in the mind. You can see in Cittanupassana Sutta this is structured. Here bhikkhu understands mind with lust as a mind with lust. No more, no less. Just pay attention. Mind without lust as mind without lust. Mind with hatred as mind with hatred. A mind without hatred as a mind without hatred. Mind with delusion as a mind with delusion. Mind without delusion as mind without delusion. A concentrated mind as concentrated, and distracted mind as distracted, an exalted mind as exalted, and unexalted mind as unexalted, surpassable mind as surpassable, and unsurpassable mind as unsurpassable, a concentrated mind as concentrated mind, unconcentrated mind as unconcentrated, liberated mind as liberated, and unliberated mind as unliberated. These 16 pairs and 16 stages are given in the discourse itself. When you see our Vandana book, you can see this. So, in this way, he does contemplate in mind internally, or he does contemplate in mind externally, or he does contemplate in mind in both internally, externally, or else he does contemplating in mind its nature of arising, he does contemplate in mind its nature of vanishing, or he does contemplating in mind its nature of both arising and vanishing. Now, we mentioned internally and externally. Normally, ordinary people who have not attained enlightenment and gained supernatural powers don't know the minds of others. Then how can they know the other mind? They know internally. How can they know the mind externally? Well, when we know what happens to us, the nature of Dhamma is, since it is universal, the way how it happened to me is the way that it happens to anybody, anywhere. That is the nature of Dhamma. Truth of Dhamma. So scientific. And that is how we have to remember this particular statement. Or else, mindfulness that is mind is simply establishing him to extent necessary for their knowledge and mindfulness. And he dwells independent, not clinging to anything in the world. Anishchito vihati natakintu loke upadhyate. This sentence, this is insight, repeated 21 times in Cittanupassana Sutta. That is, there is a mind is simply establishing him to act to the extent necessary for their knowledge and mindfulness. Atti chittantrapanasa satipattyapatitavati yavadeva jnanamattaya ati satimattaya. elaboration, explanation. This instruction contains the entire framework for concentration of mind, practicing mindfulness or concentration of mind. The Buddha first directs attention to the recognition of various mental states. He does not ask us to judge these states as good or bad. That is another very important thing to remember. Nor does he ask us to suppress or encourage them. He simply instructs us to know them clearly when they are present and to know them clearly when they are absent. The 16 states which we mentioned earlier, the 16 states, listed in this discourse began with the three unwholesome fruits. It is very interesting. Lust, raga, hatred, dosa, and delusion, moha. Sometimes we call loga dosa moha or raga dosa moha. These are the three roots of unwholesomeness. Three unwholesome roots. Buddha then moves to other important conditions of the mind, such as contraction, distraction, exalted, unexalted, concentration, unconcentration, finally liberation and non-liberation. After recognizing these mental states, the meditator broadens contemplation by observing the mind internally, externally, and both internally and externally. One then learns to observe the arising and passing away of mental states, seeing clearly their importance and condition nature. They all are impermanent, and that is important to understand that they are impermanent and their condition. As mindfulness becomes stronger, the meditator reaches a stage where there is simply the recognition. This is a mind recognizing. It is extremely difficult. The mind does all sorts of things, and it is very difficult to understand. When we come to know, we will discuss this later, that we find it difficult. But difficult doesn't mean impossible. It is difficult, no doubt, but through the constant practice, any difficult thing becomes slowly easy. At this point, observation becomes increasingly direct and free from conceptual elaboration. The mind is known simply as a process occurring according to causes and conditions. Finally, the Buddha points the culmination of the practice. The meditator does independent, not relying on or identifying with any mental state. Because the mind is seen as impermanent, conditioned, and non-self, there is no reason to cling to it. When it is impermanent, we cannot cling to it because before the thought of clinging, impermanence is, mind is already changed. section that follows, we will examine these instructions in the exact sequence given by the Buddha, beginning with recognition of the various states of mind. Understanding the meaning of Citta. We mentioned it briefly earlier, now we will go into some details as I mentioned earlier. In this section, we want to use this. The Buddha uses the word Citta. Although Citta is commonly translated as mind, actually no English word fully conveys its meaning. Because the Pali, the Buddha's language is a Dhamma language. Dhamma language. So the language Buddha used to teach Dhamma sometimes is untranslatable. Therefore, we have to use some words in Pali. It is helpful to remain the Pali term while understanding its role in the practice of contemplation. In the Buddha's teaching, we also encounter the terms mano and vijnana. These terms are closely related and are sometimes used interchangeably in the Nikayas, depending on the context. For this reason, students should be careful not to regard them as three separate entities. At the same time, they should not assume that these three words always have exactly the same meaning in every context. It is noteworthy that in the classification of the 6 kinds of consciousness, we use mind and Citta, Mano, Vijnana. Citta, Mano, Vijnana are interchangeably used. One place Citta, another place Mano, like Mano Rubbangama Dhamma, another place Citta Niyati Loko. In those places, Citta and Mano used and meaning is the same. Buddha speaks of consciousness, vijnana. For instance, Buddha speaks of eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. Tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness. This reminds us that these terms have different application according to context and should be understood in the way the Buddha employs them. For the purpose of this discussion, however, our attention should remain on the word Citta. We don't mix with other two words, Mano and Vijnana. Because the Buddha specifically calls this practice Cittanupassana, contemplation of mind. The purpose of this contemplation is not merely to know that mental activity is occurring. Most people already know them. They are thinking, remembering, planning, imagining, or perceiving. Yet, they may remain unaware of the deeper condition of the mind itself. Person may know the the reason, but may not recognize that greed is hidden behind that thought. This is also very important to remember. It is subtle. Thought arose, and the thought there is greed. One may know that one is speaking, acting, or reacting, but may not recognize the presence of hatred, attachment, pride, fear, or delusion operating beneath the surface. In this way, the roots of suffering continues to function unnoticed. It is within the citta that the roots of greed, raga, hatred, dosa, and delusion moha lie deeply embedded. These roots may remain dormant for a time, but when suitable conditions arise through the senses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, they emerge and influence thought, speech, and actions. Because ordinary people rarely examine the conditions of the citta, these developments often remain hidden. They arise, operate, and pass away without being clearly known. As a result, they continue to sustain the cycle of craving, clinging, becoming, and suffering, all underlying in the mind. For this reason, contemplation of mind is essential purification practice. Practitioner learns to observe the actual conditions of the mind moment by moment. When greed is present, it is known as greed. When greed is absent, it is known as greed is absent. When hatred is present, it is known as hatred. When hatred is absent, it is known as hatred is absent. When delusion is present, it is known as delusion. It is the same way all other mental states are observed clearly and directly. This observation is not philosophical speculation or psychological analysis or intellectual study. It is direct mindfulness of the living. And mindfulness of living mind as it functions in the present moment. We will discuss this here more later on as how we use this in our daily life. I will talk about it later on. Through this practice, hidden knots of defilements are gradually exposed. As they are seen clearly, their power weakens. Now, as long as we don't see them, they remain very powerful. As we see them happening, our attention is focused on them and we become mindful, then their power becomes weak. Their power becomes weak. And wisdom grows. The mind becomes increasingly purified. Now, before examining the various states of mind described by Buddha, it is important to understand that Cittanupassana is a direct investigation of the Chitta itself. The very place where bondage begins and where liberation must ultimately be realized. Now, recognizing various states of mind. Having established an understanding of the meaning of Chitta, we now come to first practice instruction of Cittanupassana. Buddha begins by directing attention to the various states of mind that arise and pass away. He does not begin with philosophical discussion, metaphysical speculation, or theoretical analysis. Instead, he asks the practitioners to observe the mind directly and recognize its condition at the present moment. When it is present, we become aware of it, not before nor after. This is an important point. The purpose of this contemplation of mind is not to create a new identity based on mental state. It is not to think, I am greedy, I am angry, I am distracted, I am concentrated. In our meditation instruction we mentioned many times, don't bring I and make a sentence. Don't bring a subject and predicate. I, such and such and such. We, such and such and such. But just become aware of that occurrence. Don't think I am greedy, I am angry, I am instructed, I am concentrated. Rather, the practitioner learns to recognize these states simply as conditions that have arisen due to causes and conditions. So the Buddha therefore instructs mind with lust as mind with lust. Mind without lust as mind without lust. Mind with hatred as mind with hatred. Mind without hatred as mind without hatred. Mind with delusion, mind without delusion. Mind without delusion. And then concentrated mind as concentrated. Unconcentrated mind as unconcentrated. Distracted mind as distracted. Contracted mind as contracted. Exalted mind as exalted. Unexalted mind as unexalted mind. Surpassable mind as surpassable. Unsurpassable mind as unsurpassable. Concentrated mind as concentrated. Unconcentrated. So liberated mind as liberated, unliberated mind as unliberated. You can see this, I think you all remember Cittanupassana and some Satipatthana Sutta. And they are very directly, straightforwardly mentioned without any distortion. This instruction is remarkably simple, that you must remember. Whatever state is present, it is known as it is. Nothing is added to it, nothing is taken away from it. You see, we say things as they really are, or think as it is. This statement is repeated in the Buddha's teaching very clearly, and greed is absent, one knows greed is absent. If you bring I, how can you make this? What can you do? How can you say when this is greed is present? How can you say I agree, I am greedy? No. Just simply notice the greed. When greed is absent, no greed is absent. When hatred is present, one knows there is present, there is hatred. When hatred is absent, one knows hatred is absent. The same principle applies to all other states of mind listed by the Buddha in this discourse. At first, this may seem straightforward, but in practice it requires considerable mindfulness. Mental states arise and pass away rapidly. Without mindfulness, they often influence our speech, action, and behavior before we even recognize it. For example, greed may arise and immediately lead to attachment. Hatred may arise and immediately lead to hard street. Delusion may arise and close to judgment without our noticing it. And cloud our judgment. Because of this, many mental states remain hidden and continue to operate beneath the surface of our consciousness. Through mindfulness, however, these states become visible. The practitioner begins to recognize them as soon as they arise. Instead of being controlled by them, one learns to observe them. Instead of identifying with them, one learns to understand them. The 16 states listed in this discourse by the Buddha can be grounded into 8 pairs. 16 states have 8 pairs. Each pair consists of particular conditions of mind and its opposite. Together they provide a practical framework for observing the mind as it actually functioning. So we can see these parts in the following section. We will examine these 8 pairs in exact order given by the Buddha. These are the pairs, 8 pairs. When you remember 8 pairs, it is very easy to deal with. Mind with lust as mind with lust. Mind without lust. Mind with hatred, mind without hatred. Mind with delusion and mind without delusion. Concentrated mind and distracted mind. Exalted mind, unexalted mind. Surpassable mind, unsurpassable mind. Concentrated mind as an unconcentrated mind. Liberated mind and unliberated mind. These are the 8 pairs. By observing these states carefully, practitioners begin to understand the working of the mind directly. They see how mental states arise, how they influence experience, and how they eventually pass away. This understanding lays the foundation of the deeper insight into impermanence, suffering, and non-self. that will develop later in this practice. Now, recognizing various states of mind. Mind with lust and without lust. When a pleasant object is encountered through the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body and mind, lust may arise. Object is pleasant, the lust is not in the object, but the object is simply pleasant, that's all. Lust arises in our mind, especially through our ignorance. The practitioner recognizes the mind is with lust. Lust arises dependent upon causes and conditions, especially feeling. Buddha taught with feeling as condition, craving arises, independent origination. Vedana Patyat Tanha. Through mindfulness and wise reflection, the practitioner sees the danger of craving and understanding that it learns to suffer, and then the person knows that it leads to, when the person learns it, then learns that what it does, then the person knows that it leads to suffering and renewal resistance and attachment to five aggregates. When lust fades away, the practitioner knows the mind is without lust. Now, when the lust arises, it doesn't disappear by it disappears gradually, takes some time, but through the mindful reflection, yoniso manasikara, it disappears quickly. If we don't do that, then we understand that it's naturally, because of the time, it passes away. Then mind with hatred and without hatred. When unpleasant object is encountered, aversion or hatred may arise. The practitioner recognizes this clearly as state of mind. Hatred may minimize or manifest. It may minimize. When it manifests, it as irritation, resentment, anger, or hostility. By observing it without identifying with it, the practitioner sees that hatred is conditioned and impermanent. As mindfulness grows, hatred weakens and eventually disappears. Then one knows the mind is without hatred. So when we do something, it slowly fades away, and then we know it. And mind with delusion and without delusion. Delusion arises because of ignorance, avidya. Delusion is a manifestation of avidya. Avidya present in the form of confusion, uncertainty, and misunderstanding are forms of delusion. Unlike greed and hatred, delusion is often difficult to recognize. I mentioned it even yesterday because it obscures itself. Through mindfulness investigation, like recollection of the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, and reflection on dependent origination, mind gradually becomes clear. As wisdom grows, delusion fades, and the practitioner knows the mind is without delusion. When mind becomes clear, meditator knows that it is clear. distracted mind. This is the fourth pair we in eight pairs. Fourth pair. A contracted mind, Samchitta is withdrawn, restricted, discouraged, or depressed. That mind is called Samchitta, contracted mind. Distracted mind is Vichitta, is scattered and restless, moving from one object to another. Sound, memories, bodily discomfort, anxiety, guilt, or worries may produce distractions. The practitioner recognizes each state as it arises and sees that neither remains permanently. Through mindfulness, both contraction and distraction gradually fade away. Both are negative. In this fourth pair, both are negative. Other pairs, one negative, one positive. This Sankirtan Chitta, Sankirtan Chitta, Vikirtan Chitta, Vikirtan Chitta. Both are negative. And the fifth pair, exalted mind as exalted mind and unexalted mind. What is exalted mind? An exalted mind, Mahagati Chitta, refers to mind elevated through deep concentration, including the four material jhanas and four immaterial jhanas. And unexalted mind is the ordinary mind that has not attained this refined mental state. The practitioner simply knows whichever condition is present without attachment or pride. Now, Mahagata, Amahagata. Mahagata means reach very high state. What are the high stages? Four jhanas, material jhanas, four immaterial jhanas. When the mind is reached those stages, matter can know that I am in such and such a jhana. Recognize this is such and such a jhana, this is such and such. When the mind is not reached that stage, he knows that. And the sixth pair, self-possible mind and unself-possible mind. A self-possible mind, Sauttaram Chitta, is one that can still be further developed. An unself-possible mind, Anuttaram Chitta, has reached the highest attainment of liberation. Sauttaram, suppose somebody has attained Sotapanna, who attained the first jhana. Then he knows, I still have more jhanas to attain. That is Sauttaram. Can still be further development. Or one attains Sotapanna. Then he knows I have attained Sotapanna, but I still have to develop three other attainments. Unsurpassable mind, Anuttaram Chitta, has reached the highest attainments of liberation. When there is any more attainment, then he said Anuttaram. Anuttaram means there is nothing higher than that. That is the highest attainment. The noble attainment progressively transcend lower levels of development. The practitioner recognizes the present condition of the mind without conceit or discouragement. Now when one has more stages to attain, the person will not be discouraged. Person will even make more effort around Dhamma and reach other stages. We not blame and we not depressed. When we attain that stage, suppose we attain the first jhana, he will not be discouraged at that time, even though he has to attain other jhanas, then he make additional effort, Dhamma and reach that stage. So he will not be very proud. Now I see in the Madhyamika there is called Sappurusha Sutta and Asapurusha Sutta. Asapurusha is not very great person. That person has very small mind, not in developed mind. That person thinking, suppose he is famous, he is all famous, other monks are not famous. That is his conceit. Asapurusha has that conceit. Sappurusha doesn't have that conceit. So, I encourage you to read the discourse, it's a long one, since I want to finish this very quickly. Then the seventh pair, concentrated mindness, and unconcentrated mind. A concentrated mind, samayika citta, is stable, unified, and collected. Concentration develops with the five hindrances, and five hindrances are legal. We all know that five hindrances. Sense desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt. These are five hindrances. And when these five hindrances are suppressed, no longer active in the mind, one attains the concentration. Unconcentrated mind remains disturbed by these hindrances. The practitioner learns to recognize both concentrations and unconcentrated states, or they are opposed. They are one support concentration and other support concentration. That is, the actions of hindrances support attaining gaining concentration. Present of hindrances support actions of concentration. The last pair, eighth pair, liberated mind and unliberated mind. An unliberated mind remains bound by greed, hatred, and illusion. Liberated mind, vimukta citta, is free from these defilements and from the fetters that sustain suffering. It is very interesting at the let me finish the section. Liberation develops gradually through the morality, concentration, and wisdom. As practitioner continues to cultivate mindfulness, they increasingly understand the mind as condition process rather than a self. In this way, contemplation of mind becomes path leading towards complete liberation. Now, these 8 pairs began with 3. Saragan Jittam Pajanati. Samohan Chitta, Samohan Chitta, Tvajanati, with Mohan Chitta, with first six, the first three pairs started with hatred and illusion. Now the section ends with liberation. Vimuktam. What is liberated? Liberated from these three pairs. Greed, hatred, illusion. First three pairs with greed, hatred and illusion. Last pair is free from these three first pairs. Now we want to finish this practicing contemplation of mind in daily life. Because this is not limited only to the cushion. This is something we can put into our daily practice. Contemplation of mind is not limited to formal meditation sessions. The Buddha did not just restrict this practice to a particular posture, place, or time. Whenever the mind is present and mindfulness is present, the opportunity for contemplation of mind is available. That means when you are awake, not sleeping, when we sleep, none of these things we can practice. That means this practice is available, we can do it anytime when we are awake. This practice can be developed while sitting, standing, walking, lying down. Whenever one is awake, we can practice this mindfulness. When this awake and mindful mental states can be observed. Whether the mind is affected by greed or free from greed, affected by hatred, free from hatred, concentrated or distracted, these states can be recognized whenever, wherever they arise. That is very true. All we have to do is to keep paying attention to our mind. That we can do anytime. Formal sitting meditation is often the easiest setting for this practice. When the body is relatively still and externally still, and there are no external sound, taste and so forth, the various disturbances, no activities, and therefore, when they are very limited, it is easy to practice when we are sitting on the cushion. The practitioner can observe the changing condition of the mind with fewer distractions. However, the true value of Cittanupassana extends far beyond the meditation cushion. Daily life provides countless opportunities to observe the mind. While preparing for food, eating, cleaning, drinking, dressing, driving, working, speaking, with all other performances, ordinary responsibility, various mental states continually arise and pass away, and we can observe them. Although bodily activities can be performed with mindfulness and clear comprehension, the practitioner should not stop with the awareness of bodily movements alone. It is equally important to understand the condition of the mind that motivates and accompanies those activities. A person may walk mindfully, speak mindfully, eat mindfully, work mindfully, or perform any daily activity with awareness. But the mind behind the activities may still be influenced by greed, hatred, and delusion. Therefore, the practitioner should continually examine the chitta and that accompanies each action. So, in this practice of clear comprehension, sampajana, one understands the purpose, suitability, domain, and reality of an action. In the practice of contemplation of mind, one goes further and examines the conditions of the mind itself. Then asks, is mind affected by greed or free from greed? Is it affected by hatred or free from hatred? Is it affected by delusion or free from delusion? This becomes essentially important during transition from one activity to another, when standing up after sitting, beginning to walk after standing, speak after silence, starting new task, meeting a new person, or moving from one place to another. The mind often changes, rapidly changes. So new desire, expectation, aversion, plans, worries, and distractions may arise. Therefore, practitioners should pay special attention to chitta whenever an action is end, another begins. These movements provide valuable information for the person to develop mindfulness and attain liberation. With this, I think I must end today's talk, and I think we learned a lot of new information of mindfulness of the mind, Cittanupassana. And I hope we keep practicing, and one day we will accomplish all the things